Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of The Challenge We Face with Quacy Smith. My name is Kathleen Harris, and I am your host. And today we have convened a very special gathering of guests that we have here in Denver, Colorado on location. And they are here to speak to the representation of Arizona's Congressional District, CD9, and how they feel about the incumbent Representative Paul Gosar. So today we have here Dave Gosar. Welcome, Dave. We have Jen Gosar. Thank you so much, Jen, for being here today. And we have Tim Gosar. Thank you, Tim, for coming. So we are very grateful to have you here to speak to the fact not only that you feel that your brother, Representative Paul Gosar, is unfit for office, and you want to speak to the reasons why you feel that way, but also on the flip side, we want to let folks know that you are very supportive of the run that Quacy Smith is putting forth for that seat. So Dave, why don't we start with you? Can you speak to the journey that has brought you here in 2024? Because this has been a long journey over the last 14 years.
Certainly. Paul has been in Congress, as maybe some people know, since he started in 2011, ran 2010. And even at that time, I was very skeptical of him actually being in Congress. I just didn't think he had the necessary skills or the attributes that would have made him a good representative. So, but you know, you don't know. So he ran on and ran, and he won up in the Flagstaff area. And that's where he's from, and that's where he still lives. You know, he may have a rental down here somewhere. I heard he has one in Bullhead City, but I can guarantee you he lives in Flagstaff still. And immediately things just are going off the rails, like we all expected it would be, you know. But we didn't say anything for the longest time. We want to give him his space, you know, see what could happen. And, you know, it's just a difficult thing to want to, you know, have to say something. You know, it has to go pretty far to come out against your family. And so we waited and waited, and it kept getting worse, and it kept getting worse, and he kept doing wilder and wilder things. Some of those I could mention, like at one point in time, and people have a hard time believing this, he was advocating for a solar chimney, something that would have been taller than the Burj Dubai in Dubai. And somehow or another, this contraption would have produced a lot of energy. But on the face, it's ridiculous. But he was behind all that, you know. And all sorts of other things. He was trying to take away, you know, the Affordable Care Act, voted against it every single time. You know, he was behind all the government shutdowns. You know, he was generally combative, you know, antagonistic towards people, just unpleasant, you know, in how he presented himself. Not a person who was trying to, you know, work across the aisle and try to, you know, to work things out and try to help the people. I think if the voters would look at his record, they would find out he's done absolutely nothing in 14 years to help anybody. He's tried to take away their health care. He says he's for jobs, but, you know, he votes against the CHIPS Act. It's important to Arizona. He votes against the Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure bill, even though he goes around taking credit for the infrastructure bill, to the point where even the White House press secretary calls him out on that. He's done nothing for anybody, you know, not his constituents. Maybe rich mining interests or very wealthy people, maybe he's done them favors, but he's done nothing for the common guy. So he keeps getting worse, and it's not just his policy positions. He's taking these very extreme positions in regards to, let's say the Charlottesville March. And that's what eventually made us say enough's enough. And that was 7 years after he took office before we actually spoke out. And that was just too much. Defending those people and trying to pretend like, there was somebody else behind it than these Nazis. And it was all some sort of like, set up situation, which everybody knows it wasn't. And he just looks crazy when he's doing these things. Like he's just not right. And so we said, no, this is our family name. People have talked to him over the years to try to get him to, kind of temper his approach and try to be more reasonable and try to work towards something good for people. And he just refuses to. In fact, this didn't apply to me, but I understood from others in our family that they talked to him about the Affordable Care Act and said, Paul, you're going to hurt our health care. We get our health care through that.
Sure.
And he didn't care. Didn't care. I mean, what kind of person, says to his family member, well, I don't care if you have health care. I'll just, I'm just going to vote this way. Take it away from you.
Wow.
And even through those years, because that happened in the early years, we stood by and didn't come out against him. But when you're getting into anti-Semitism and bigotry and all that sort of things, that's about character. That's not about policy. That's about, in this country, there's certain things that just transcend all those things. We shouldn't have to debate whether it's okay to be a racist or whether it's okay to be a bigot or an anti-Semite. Those things should be disqualifying. And Paul's got just this extensive record of dabbling in that and associating with people that are full-throated behind all of that. The guy who runs the social media service Gab, Nick Fuentes. Paul and Nick Fuentes were close for a long period of time. Just a virulent neo-Nazi and bigot, misogynistic human being. You look at this Ali Alexander, who eventually, was behind the whole, one of the key instrumental people in the insurrection on January 6th. It's later revealed, this guy's a groomer, of young men, and, pretending that that's not him, that's what he's against. And this is the people Paul pals around with, and when it gets, so blatant, then maybe he distances himself, but it's all political. Paul's in this for Paul. Paul is in this completely for Paul, I can assure you. And you can prove that to yourselves by looking at his record and say, what has he done for me? He's done nothing for you. And ever since that time, we have, consistently come out and supported his opponents to try to get him removed from office. To be honest with you, he doesn't look well. I think you all can see that. He does not look like he's healthy. I think this whole experience has been very detrimental even to his health. Quite honestly, I think the voters in this district would be doing him a favor to his health and to the health of his family if if the voters said, 14 years is enough, Paul. We gave you 14 years to do something for us, and what did you do? Nothing. You did nothing. You voted against our interests, Wow. And so that's why we're here. We'll always be here. And when your campaign reached out to us, we looked into it. We looked into what Quacy stands for. We had a conversation with you and Quacy. Quacy, from what I can tell, is here for you. He's not like Paul needs this, people. He needs this to be an important person. Quacy doesn't need this. Quacy's here to help you. And that's why we're here supporting Quacy, and we would urge the voters to vote for Quacy Smith for Arizona 9.
Thank you so much, Dave. There's so much to unpack in everything that you said, and we will get into more policy discussion after we go around the room. I want to get to Jen and to Tim, if you'd just like to open up with some of your thoughts as well.
Well, like Dave, when Paul told me in the summer of 2010 that he was running, I believe it was the summer of 2010, I was shocked. I didn't know that Paul had any real interest in policy writing, policy implementation, real connection to broader social issues. I felt Paul, like is not somebody that's really, with the right skills, could certainly support, those that are really better suited to that work, but just, okay, you're running for that. So I looked up his website, and as somebody who was first a performing artist, I got my opportunity to learn and really perform as an improviser through Spanish-speaking communities. Our best and 51st state, hopefully at some point soon, Puerto Rico, the nation of Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Peru, across Central and South America. So as I looked at my career and the development of my career and decided that I wasn't going to continue in the industry, I wanted to continue in the community. And moving to another country, coming back to the States, studying to be an interpreter, by the time he runs, I'm now working in that community in a different capacity. And what I saw in Paul's first campaign was jaw-dropping. It made me sick to my stomach because he was aligning with Jan Brewer, Joe Arpaio, and SB 1070, and that couldn't have been further from my experience, not only as a performing artist, but also now as a healthcare interpreter. That continued, and it worsened to the point I knew my brothers and sisters who had more connection and agency with him, had talked to him and it didn't work. I went back to school to finish my undergrad, wrote a research paper about what are some of the nuances, not just of people crossing the border, but of what their lives are like when they're here, in order to try and inform him, right? Offer him more information from which to make his decisions. And at that time, I noticed he was open to it, and it was, I think, the year of the shellacking, right, of the Republican Party. And when all of a sudden, we have to answer to our Hispanic brothers and sisters. They're not going to vote for us. We better switch. And the rhetoric switched too. He talked about refugees. He didn't talk about illegal aliens. And as soon as that wasn't working or wasn't his interest, or it wasn't the party platform, he went on to become more rabid, and the effects weren't happening. What he did in Arizona's not a vacuum. I was feeling those impacts next to people every day. Kids that were living in great fear of signing up for DACA because they were afraid that they'd either be reported because they were now on a registry, or they weren't going to get any help and still live in the shadows without it. I was with American citizens, people who had come here, who had earned their way here. They were American citizens being called and yelled at to go back to their home country, right? I was seeing the impact of that hate in my life, professionally and personally, and it was very distressing to me. So as time has continued, I have followed the policies, and I don't have the same nuance that Dave does, but I can tell you on the human side, I have definitely seen it, and it makes my conviction to this issue, to the fact that I want to bring light to Paul's hate and bigotry at every opportunity. Now contrast that with Quacy Smith. Quacy Smith is not a transplant, and even those new to the district that would want to run, there's something noble and loyal about that, but Quacy isn't that. Quacy's been there a long time, and Quacy comes to his opinions, he comes to his ideas through his connection with the community and a broad swath of that community. He understands the community as a public servant. He understands that the community as someone in the justice system, but at a different level. He understands how the language that we speak in policy implements in people's real life, how that is interpreted to impact real people. So what Quacy brings is entirely different than Paul. Similar in that he's a longtime resident, but he comes with a level of content and experience that Paul doesn't have despite 14 years in the seat. And like Dave, I can say unequivocally, I'm confident that Arizona citizens, not one of them, can point to considerable, significant, or any legislation that's helped their lives, literally. I don't know of one, because if it was one, I would highlight that, but there isn't one.
Wow, thank you again for your testimony, because this is ultra important in this race as we're going to go to the ballots coming out in a very short period of time. Tim, I'd like to give you the floor as well. Anything that you'd like to contribute as we open this conversation up?
I think it's important for people to believe who they are, and that they can do better, and we can have better people. And we need to have those people to do those things. And it isn't him. It isn't him. We can do a lot much better. We can do a lot much better than this.
Wow. Yes. Well, so you all have spoken to the fact that you've been at this for a very long time, and we want to thank you for stepping up to the plate once again. It takes a lot of courage to speak out publicly about your convictions and beliefs, especially when it involves your family and very personal issues to you. So, Dave, I want to go back to you, and maybe we can talk about some of the specific policy issues that concern you, because as an example, as we know, your brother has made a lot of the border and everything that is happening down at the border and how it affects our country, in his opinion. And we have noted that over 19 times he has voted in opposition to helping the situation at the border. And so it seems that the projection in public is not the same as what his voting record actually is. And so I would love for you to speak to that.
No, because if you solve the problem, then who does Paul demonize now? You know? I mean, he doesn't really want the problem solved. You know? I mean, you cannot, I mean, there's this misperception that you know, Democrats or, you know, progressive, you know, people with that kind of ideology don't want a secure border. Everybody wants a secure border. Everybody wants legal immigration. Nobody says that the law should be violated with, you know, without any repercussions. No, that's not what people want. But so that means that there's a consensus there to solve the problem. But every time you reach a consensus, where's Paul? He votes against it. And he'll come up with some, you know, to be quite honest, dishonest reason why he didn't vote for it, you know. And, you know, there's this recent, very strong border security bill. It only had to do with border security. You know, 1,000 more agents, you know, machines that detect fentanyl at the border. You know, it was just all about border security. It should have been something he should have jumped all over. But no, because again, you solve the problem, then what does Paul go around telling people to be fearful of? You know, he needs this problem to exist. He's not trying to solve it. You know,
Dave, if it's okay, I'd like to add something
Yeah,
to take that
sure,
to
yeah.
another step, because
Yes.
in 2017, 2018, 2019, they were separating parents and their children at the border. Did Paul talk about his outrage? No, because Paul was for it. So not only does he not want to solve the problem, no, he would like it to be worse. He would like to harm people for the suffering that they, in large part, have nothing to do with. He wants to penalize people for making a reasonable decision in untenable circumstances. I mean, so it's not, he doesn't just want to not solve the problem, because that's true, that's absolutely true. And on the other, he takes it further. So what people in Arizona are electing is not something that fits, that is a working solution, because I don't think a border ever is going to be solved. It's a dynamic situation with climate change and the migration, mass migration of human beings. How are we going to have any one solution but a set of practices to adjust to a very difficult environment? But Paul, No, he wants to brutalize people. He wants to separate babies from their mothers and fathers, hundreds of which I don't believe they've even found.
Well, I think there's a lot of things that can be done to mitigate the problem. I mean, but you can't mitigate a problem if, you know, the side that says there's a problem says, well, we don't want to be a part of the solution. And this recent border bill was negotiated by one of the most conservative members of Congress with the Democrats. I mean, there was nothing wrong with it, you know, and in fact, a lot of Democrats thought, well, you know, this is pretty harsh, you know, it's one-sided because we need to do not just the security part, we need to kind of, you know, address the root causes or, you know, get more asylum judges and things like that to clean up the backlog. But they say, look, that is part of the solution here. We need to get better border security, and everybody's for that. But, you know, what's it say about a person who says, oh, I want border security, I really want border security. Then every time the issue comes up, he says, oh, I'm voting against it. I mean, it has to be that he doesn't really want the problem solved. And he just keeps running year after year and voting year after year against border security measures. You got to ask yourself why. I mean, seriously, you got to ask yourself why. Does that seem reasonable to you? Or does that seem extreme? Does that seem like a person who's just really out there to kind of keep themselves in Congress and not try to really address anything?
Yeah, and I will say that we're going to bring Quacy into this conversation in just a bit. And I do know that as he's gone around the district talking to voters, border security is a big issue for a lot of the citizens of the district and citizens of Arizona and the country. But if you are there in Congress, the idea would be that you're there to help contribute and solve the problem, not to just put it off. And it seems that that is what has happened in this case. So, Tim, are there any other particular issues that you'd like to address or bring up as far as something that's important to you that you would have hoped perhaps that was addressed in a way that hasn't been in your eyes?
I just think people are suffering. They need help. And he's not going to ever do anything like that. He's just not going to. He doesn't care to help people. And we need that so much. And that's what we need.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and going into a few other policy issues that we've been talking about, we've had conversations over the last few days. This has all come together very quickly. And again, we thank you for being here, but we know how important this is to you to speak out and to let the voters of the 9th District of Arizona know what your feelings are as a family. I mean, this is so important because, you know, it speaks to the urgency of the situation that you are here to speak about the incumbent, but also about the prospect of Quacy Smith being in this seat. So, as you know, Quacy comes to this with a background in law enforcement, as a former police officer, as a Marine, as an attorney. And so, Dave, as an attorney yourself, perhaps you can speak to his experience that you feel will be brought to the table as a legislator.
Well, I think all those things you mentioned clearly. I mean, it certainly helps when you're, you know, promulgating laws to be a lawyer. That's kind of part of the game, you know. And you know, it's not necessary, but it's helpful, you know. You know, being from law enforcement, having that background in security, it seems like that'd be pretty important when you're talking about border security. You know, Paul doesn't have that background. Paul was a dentist. You know, to his credit, he was an excellent dentist, but that's where he should have stayed, because, you know, he's been a disaster as a congressman. He's in my mind, has disgraced himself, and he's disgraced our family, and he's done a disservice to all the people here and the people nationwide. But you know, so if you're looking at the qualifications for the job, you know, on the one hand, Quacy Smith with the law enforcement background, the military background, the legal background, that seems tailor-made for the job. And on the other hand, you have a person who's done nothing for 14 years. Now, tell me how that qualifies you to do the job, that you have been in Congress for 14 years and done nothing for anybody, and somehow or another that qualifies you for the job. I think that automatically disqualifies you for the job. And so, I mean, just looking at the two, just qualification-wise, you know, there's just no choice.
And Jen, I would just like to address with you in particular, because I know you have a background in language, and you're bilingual in Spanish and English, and you've been working with particular populations with children, and how all of this rhetoric affects them in their daily lives. I can imagine that when they watch TV and they see the news and they hear about politicians sort of going back and forth, I'm sure you want to sort of put all of this extremism to the side for the benefit of the children.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I want to tie this to Quacy because I think it's cogent, actually. As someone who's worked in service nearly my entire professional life, I have seen people at all sorts of different points, at their beginnings, literally, at their ends, literally, a lot of stuff in between. And I think we have a choice as human beings. Do we see them in their struggles and connect with that, or do we judge it? And there's a lot about Paul that is absolutely in judgment of people. Here's Quacy Smith, doing just fine, doesn't need this office, but instead of staying in law enforcement, instead of staying as a Marine, instead of staying as an attorney, Quacy also develops the person that he is as a spiritual minister, right? He's gone an extra mile to understand himself. And as he looks at human beings, and he's seen them, I'm sure, in law enforcement, in the military, I can imagine the absolute best and the absolute worst. He chooses to continue to serve people and to ask for them to consider him. I think that's a powerful statement, because Paul doesn't. When you listen to Paul, if you can listen to what he says, if he says something that you can actually discern, it is judgmental, it is cruel, and it does not express understanding of anything, especially not the people he's judging. I ask you to listen to Quacy Smith and see if you hear the same thing, because you won't. I'm sure of it.
And that's an interesting juxtaposition, right? Because we have Quacy Smith, a man of faith, husband, father, and just, someone who is dedicated to public service. And then Representative Gosar, who has expressed extremist views, who has been tied to white supremacists, and who has expressed racist and anti-Semitic thoughts. And it has been such a pleasure talking to the three of you, and I find it hard to believe that you are even associated with each
So
other,
do we.
let alone related, right?
We're astonished too.
And I just, I can't imagine what it must feel like to have your family name out there associated with these types of beliefs. So any one of you, if you want to speak to that.
It's mortifying. I mean, you want to change your name. I mean, we've talked about it. Jen and I have talked about it. I mean, it's so just appalling, no pun intended, that, he's associated our good name with creatures like Nick Fuentes and Steve Bannon and Tommy Robinson and who is it, Ali Alexander, and all of these despicable lowlife creatures, and has basically associated our name with bigotry and anti-Semitism and racism. And in fact, Paul, I was looking at my notes here that I kind of keep track of him a little bit. He also called for the abolishment of the Constitution. I mean, really? That's what we accept as a candidate now? A guy who says that, well, the laws should just be disregarded. A guy who called for a person who served honorably in the military to be court-martialed. Mark Milley, General Mark Milley. Paul doesn't have the slightest fathom of what it is to serve for others. Quacy's been in the military, he knows that. Paul doesn't. Paul serves himself. I mean, I'm telling you people right now, Paul serves himself. And we told everybody about this, and this isn't an I told you moment. This is another, I want to remember moment, that in 2017, that Paul was a disaster. And hasn't he been since that time? He's been censored in Congress. He's, stood up on the floor and tried to, on January 6th and did all the groundwork beforehand to try to overturn an election. And here's some other, he voted against the Affordable Insulin Act. He voted against the act to stop predatory gas charges. I have the act here, but I have to find it here. He voted against veterans and covering their health care from burn pits over in Iraq. It goes on and on and on. He is just consistently, he votes against the people, he claims to represent, he doesn't try to solve problems, he actively goes out of his way not to solve a problem so he can continue to run on it. It's just been absolutely mortifying to be associated with him. And, I don't know how much more I can express it than that. It's been appalling.
And so just to wrap up this segment of the conversation before we bring Quacy in, I just want to speak to his involvement, your brother's involvement in January 6th, because I do feel that that has been a conversation that hasn't been fully exposed. And there have been people at lower levels who are now going through the justice system and who are being adjudicated appropriately. But I know that you all have called for your brother to be expulsed from Congress, in fact. And that's been a mission since the horrific day that we experienced on January 6, 2021. So if you can speak to that, about the process that you went through witnessing that on that day and ever since, what your thoughts might be about his involvement.
The day of January 6th, I was working in COVID response for Seattle-King County Public Health. And as was habit, I had an extra small screen in the corner of one of my screens as I was calling and trying to provide resources and support people at an incredibly scary time. I had a little part of one screen that I could keep watching the news, because if there was a press conference from the White House, from Dr. Fauci, it helped us to know about it so that we could at least check or ask, right, with other people that were, health experts, public health experts, right? And I watched it as I talked to people, and I was floored. I knew he was, per Zoe Lofgren's staff, found him to be the biggest proponent of the big lie. And I had been watching it on Twitter. I had been responding to it at some level, but watching him out there, like, we're going to take the Hill, we're going to have to take back the House, right? And I knew he was absolutely in over his head. And it was that he was a big part of it. And of course, in every image of January 6th, you see Paul with the American flag mask below his nose, right? Ted Cruz to his left, or maybe to his right, I don't know, anyway. Ted Cruz, and as part of the absolute image, and I think that's the truth. He is absolutely fundamentally a part of it. I don't think he's a mastermind by any stretch, but he is a fervent contributor. And it is a coup attempt on this government. Jack Smith, Special Counsel Jack Smith, has brought the charges. We are seeing what the justice system does, and when it's corrupt or when it's absolutely trying to hold people accountable. But Paul is in up to his eyeballs in it. Well, we know he is.
Yeah, and if the voters want to find out the story there, there was a New York Times bestseller came out, just a couple years ago called Weapons of Mass Delusion about January 6th. Yes. Guess who the first chapter is devoted to? Paul. I mean, as far as I could tell, he's the first one out there publicly talking about the election stolen. I mean, publicly, he's out there, when they're counting the votes and wherever it was here, it was in Maricopa County, I can't remember where it was, but he's out there, leading chants and all this sort of thing.
Sure.
I mean, he Ali Alexander, a guy I mentioned before, he calls Paul, and he was instrumental in this old Stop the Steal movement. He calls Paul the spirit animal of the movement. I mean, he couldn't have been more involved in it. And quite frankly, I'm surprised he hasn't been charged. The only thing I can guess is there's so many other people that they need to get to before they get to him that have a higher profile that maybe he'll never be charged. But I mean, he jumped in that, with both hands and feet from the get-go. And I think he was even behind the scenes. I mean, he met with Trump on, was it December 21st?
Yeah.
Where they talked about all this.
Sure.
And so he's, I'm just wondering if Trump loses the election, if he's not going to do it again, Yeah.
Well, I know you have a lot of thoughts about the national implications of re-electing former President Trump and how that may trickle down to events similar to what we witnessed on January 6, 2021. I actually have a similar family outrage on that day. My cousin is Officer Harry Dunn, who's been very outspoken
Thank you to him.
about
I just listened last
his,
night.
involvement. And so, we have that in common.
Yeah.
And he's running for office too.
Oh, yeah.
He was.
He was, yeah.
So, yes, but all of us are supporting Quacy in his quest to get to Washington and make sure that the voters of the 9th District of Arizona are properly represented. So,
Wow, what
I
a
think
small
we want
world,
to,
huh?
yes, it is a
Yeah.
very small world, and I think that's why this has come together so beautifully.
Well,
And
we're not
so-
the only ones doing this anymore. It seems like we were kind of some of the first, but, Linda Carter, who played Wonder Woman back
Sure.
70s, 80s, she came out against her sister
Yes.
Pam Carter in Arizona 4. You've seen the Kennedys come out against Bobby Kennedy.
Sure.
Andy Biggs family,
The Biggs family briefly did it, years ago.
Giuliani's daughter.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, yeah.
Just
There's
the
some.
other day.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
some,
Again,
yeah.
yeah.
So, people,
Stephen
all
Miller's
these
uncle,
people kind of have kind of a screw loose in your mind.
Well, I
I
think-
mean, isn't that kind of the common thread? It's not really so much about policy. It's like these people are just out to lunch, all of them.
And I think the convictions are so strong from family members like yourselves, where you feel the need to speak out, even though it's a member of your family. I mean, that speaks to the level of urgency, again, that this requires, right? And so I want to thank all three of you for speaking out, and we're going to bring Quacy into the conversation so that you can speak to him directly. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll be
Thank
back in just a moment. So welcome back to this very special edition of The Challenge We Face with Quacy Smith. I am here with the Gosar family, the three siblings, Dave, Jen, and Tim, and we're going to bring in Quacy Smith so that he can have a conversation with the family. So Quacy, if you'd like to come on in and join us.
Hey, Tim, good to see you. Thank you for coming. Jen, good to see you. Hey, Dave,
Good to see you, Quacy.
good to see you. Thank you all for being here. Hi, Kathleen.
Hello.
I see you all the time.
Yes.
So I can say.
Well, thank you for joining us, and we've had a very productive and fruitful conversation, often difficult to speak of this situation with the incumbent in this race, but very important and urgent because we need to provide the contrast that you have with the current office holder and why you are the better choice for this district. So we'd just like to have an open conversation between yourself and the family so that we can bring this all together and understand how they came to provide support and an endorsement for your candidacy.
And thank you. And I'll say this to you all again, Dave and Jen. I said it to you all earlier, and Tim, I don't think you were here when I said it, but it literally took me, well, up to this, but more than a year to come to the decision to be okay to even sit down, you know what I mean, and have this conversation with you, because it's family, it's touchy. I can only imagine the impact that Paul's time in office and some of the things that he's espoused has had on your family. And again, like I said, I'm a family guy myself. You know, I'm one of those guys, don't fool with my family, you know what I mean, kind of thing. And people have asked, most folks that I even talk to, Republicans in the district, independents and Democrats, they always, man, his own family doesn't support him, man. I always pivot away from it, because, man, I'm not messing with the guy's family, you know what I mean? And like I've said to you all, you know, in conversations, you know, off camera, because I pray for your brother every day. I'm not only the person that's running against him, I'm a constituent in his district. The man has been my congressman, and well, at least was supposed to be, you know what I mean, my congressman. He just hasn't done the job. And I was just so hands off with but there comes a time where people have to be told the whole truth. And so after, you know, talking with, you know, advisors and stuff, it was needful, it was appropriate. And when the connection was made between your family and the campaign, I said, you know, yeah, we could, you know, sit down. And I just hurt for you as a family. I was listening to you talk earlier, Dave, when you were mentioning the impact and the shame, you know what I mean, to the family, to the family name, to hear that you had to have a conversation with your sister about changing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very
We've had
much.
that conversation more than once. And, you know, and Quacy, I would love nothing better than to not be supporting you right now. I would love nothing better than Paul to have gone in, helped a bunch of people, and been, you know, such an outstanding figure in Congress that they would be erecting a statue to him down here. And that I could be in the room supporting, and I would love nothing better. You know, I mean, I don't begrudge his position. I wouldn't even want the position you're seeking. I'd much rather be on the snake fishing, you know, or up in the mountains. So there's no, you know, jealousy at all, because I would wish him nothing but the best. But he hasn't been that guy, and he's done immeasurable damage to our family. It has caused rifts between other family members, some that did not support us in coming out against him, and there's resentment there between us and them. And he's done just enormous damage to our family. I think it's irreparable. And, you know, we just hope that someday the voters say, enough's enough. Our representatives should be speaking for us, should be trying for us, should not be trying for himself. But that's what Paul's doing. Yeah. You know, and I can see that you know, have that interest at heart. This isn't something you need. This is something you're doing to try to help people.
Sure. Yeah, and it is. You nailed it right on the head. If I'm elected to Congress, oh yeah, I'm taking a pay cut, and a whole lot of things are going to change. You know what I mean? And I'm okay with it, because I think for this election, and I've said it all across the district, all across the state, for this election, there is a better choice. But this election matters. We can't let this go on another 2 years. And like I said, my heart's prayer, and I meant it when I said it the first time, and I'll say it again. I pray for your brother every day, as well as all other. I prayed for President Trump every day. I mean, hoping that he would change and do better. And it just, if it's not in somebody to do better, they're just not going to do better. Unfortunately, I think that's the case with Congressman Gosar. It's not in him to do better, at least concerning this. And like I said to you when we spoke on the phone before coming to me today, my biggest hope and prayer is that somehow, you know, he's He's not in office, you know what I mean? I think the voters need to handle that, and that he's reconciled back to his family. With it. At the end of the day, you're his siblings, and I want to see you all healthy family, you know, and go for it, you know, sit down at the table of Thanksgiving dinner together. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but at least that's my hope and prayer, and I want you all to know that I never wanted to, you know, drive a wedge, even further a wedge in between you and your family. I was listening to you talk a minute ago, Jen, about, you know, about some of the things with the border and separating families and stuff. And I'm wondering how Paul got into that space. The whole Nick Fuentes, white supremacist. I mean, the record is clear that is espousing these things, even like with the mining. For the uranium up in the district, in the 9th district, where Native Americans clearly have said, don't mind on this ground, this is sacred ground. And it's not only sacred ground, but we perform some of our prayer rituals and whatnot, but also you're damaging our flow of water coming out, because you don't know where the mining runoff can come off. And so virtually you can end up killing a bunch of these Native Americans that uses that water supply. And Congressman Gosar's reply was, oh, well, they can say that about any area of ground that they used to perform rituals on. And for me, I was taken back, like, wait, time out. You're a congressman. The president, Biden, has passed and made a national monument, and you've made it one of your chief objectives to overturn what the president has done. And you see it with these families. I'm sure you all have had conversations, you know, off camera that CNN or, you know, Fox News doesn't know about. But this mining thing with natives, this thing with families and dreamers, and your position of, like, where did this come from? How did Paul get here? You guys are wonderful. You said, let's bring up the race. You're sitting here talking with a black guy, and I haven't felt one. I have actually enjoyed every second, literally every second of our time together today. And where did that come from, Jen?
You know, it's interesting because I probably, in some respects, have the least insight. I'm the youngest and Paul's the oldest. So when I come into consciousness of knowing this person, my oldest brother, he's blonde and he was my big brother. And when he would come back from college, you know, I would wait up at night. I couldn't, like, they would, days before they would come, and like, oh, Mom, I'm coming home, right? And she had her time getting us to bed. And I had to have nightmares that they got back safe. And, sorry, it's hard to talk about because he was something that was a wonderful example. And even to the point when he was a dentist, there were a few decisions where he didn't have to do something with integrity, but he chose to. And from 2010 to 2017, I struggled mightily because I remembered that. And I didn't want to believe that Paul wasn't Paul, right? And I lived with the conflict every day, people trusting me with their stories. Were they to know who I was related to? Would they believe me? Would they tell me the truth? Would they get the health care they needed? Because they needed to get it through me. I needed to hear it, understand it, and repeat it, and be faithful to their words, to their meaning, to who they are. And so I don't know, because I thought that was a nice person. But by 2017, I was clear. That person wasn't who Paul has become. And Paul has become somebody that feeds off hate, and that he looks for validation from whatever's popular in the most extreme parts of our society. That he wants the attention, he needs the attention. I don't know what Paul would do without the attention. The reason we're here is that because people give us a chance to speak about our integrity. We're here because we have some sort of impact. We're not here because we need people's attention. We ourselves, we like our lives just as we are. But to see this person go to that extreme and to remember somebody as a little girl that I would, again, have nightmares about, that he wouldn't get home safe. It's hard to reconcile. But the truth is, this is the reality that we're in. And I can't look at you. I can't look at you, Kathleen. I can't look at him. I can't look at my brother. And I can't feel like my word is valuable, that my character is something to be counted on, that I be entrusted with little kids. Those little kids, the most vulnerable little people, right? How can I say that I'm worth that and not be truthful with my community, right? In Arizona, albeit a distant community, their decisions impact me. If I could vote there, I would. But I don't live there. And I appreciate that we're given a chance to let people know that we care.
And at his core, Quacy, I think I'm only 2 years younger, 2.5 years younger than Paul. And what I've seen over our lifetimes is Paul's a very insecure person. He's a very insecure person. He doesn't have an inner strength where he's like, I know I am, I'm comfortable in my own skin. He needs the validation from others. He needs to be an important person, or he doesn't feel, very good about himself, And I think that's what all of this is. And he goes along, and the voters, and wherever he's at, he'll tell them what they want to hear. And inside, he just convinces them, oh, this is what I think too. But he's always been capable of self-delusion, always. And it's all about him being an insecure person. And that is why he never does anything for the people. He just is doing stuff to keep him on top of the heap. And he'll just say what it takes to get there.
And I hear voters say a lot of times, we want change, we're ready for change on both sides, Dems and independents. We want change. But I can't fathom for the life of me why, if we won't change, we keep sending the same people to Washington who has not only not brought change, but actually actively participated against change. Like Congressman Gosar, 19 times, at least 19 times, things that could have had a positive impact on immigration. Some of it securing the border, extra border patrol agents, the immigration judges, fixing the ports of entry, all of this stuff. The last bill that was put on before Congress voted against it. He voted against it solely because President Trump said I could use this border problem for political gain. And I've seen Paul in sessions within the last several months in our district, Social Security roundtables. That's the popular thing he's been doing recently, Social Security roundtables, because a lot of the voters in our district are either Social Security age or getting there. And no answers to it. But this is what his answer was. Well, why is Social Security the way it is? Social Security the way it is because the Biden-Harris administration has failed to secure the border. And folks you sound real good as long as you're not listening. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, It's like
those two things aren't even connected.
Yeah, and Social Security, if Social Security has been tanked in the last couple of years, then it was a problem way before that to begin. This Social Security issue, these folks have known about this since GW's, President Bush, George W., G-Dub's time, 43 or whatever number he was. They've known that this Social Security, now it's at an impasse, or they're on their heels concerning it, but how dare you relate border issues for vulnerable senior adults to an issue at the border that you just a couple weeks ago had a chance to resolve, but you voted against that, but passed a bill to create a $500 bill and put Donald Trump's, I got a whole list of Americans we can put on this. How about John McCain?
Yeah, really?
Let's put his face on the $500 bill. And then another question, and why would you create, this is what I'm asking myself as a constituent, why would you create a $500 bill for people who can afford the $500 bill if the economy is as bad as y'all saying it is? Why do we need a $500 bill? And isn't that against the law anyway? Last time I checked, I think there was an act that was passed several years back, probably 100 years back, that said you can't put a person that's alive on a $500 bill, or on a bill period? Don't they have to be dead for a few years before that? And if you're that big of a Christian, doesn't the Bible speaks about glorifying men, and the scripture says that their God is on their money? Are you trying to make the whole spectrum of it in several? And you have folks like my wife. You voted against. You've done everything possible to take care of the Affordable Care Act, and my wife, who has multiple sclerosis, we get a bill for $82,000 every 6 months for infusions for multiple sclerosis. And you had a chance to fix it.
Yeah. And Quacy, he's known that I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 15 years ago, over 15 years ago. He's known that. He's known that and voted, I probably near 100 times against the Affordable Care Act.
Wow. His own sister. You could have,
And then we're the ones that are thought of as, acting inappropriately when we finally say, no, you're not going to associate our name with anti-Semitism or racism. You're just not going to do that. And we're the ones that are trying to take away people's health care. Yeah. And just doing all the other bizarre things. I mean, the things he's done are just bizarre. I mean, if people would just get on the internet, get on YouTube and start looking at some of the videos, you'd be shocked. You would go like, how? This guy isn't well. Yeah. And he's not well at all. I don't know what the problem is. He hasn't shared that with anybody. He lies to the voters about it. He says there's nothing wrong with him. Clearly is something wrong with him. But the average person has no idea how bad it can get until they get on YouTube and start looking at him and some of these clips. They're incredible,
Yeah, these are things that I've, kind of tracked, obviously being a candidate, but you pay attention to because you live in the district, things like that, like basic health care, and then the border thing where you had a chance to fix it, you didn't. But one of those border things, this is another one of those head scratchers. And I think this is one of those ones, I think I said to Jed earlier, this is one of those ones that overcooked my grits, you know what I mean? I had it by then. I was like, this is enough, and somebody has to do something, grits were overboiling at that point. But one of the immigration-related things, he sided with this stuff, that veterans of the United States military that were not properly documented would be deported and couldn't come. So they're good enough to put themselves in harm's way
For this country.
for the country, but not good enough to stay.
How about he voted against a bill to prevent the cleanup of PFAS chemicals at airports, and then I had another one, about the burn pits, voting against that health care protection for veterans there. I mean,
Did he vote
voted
against the 9/11 responders
He's voted
too,
a lot of, yeah.
It would be consistent
He voted
that he did.
against giving gold medals to the defenders of the Capitol.
Sure.
He was,
And one thing that really bothers me, we're supposed to have a debate, a couple of weeks ago, whenever it was. Was it last week? Everything runs together after a while. Everything runs together after a while.
I think each day is a week at this
Yeah,
point.
no, yeah.
Right?
I can't believe it.
I can only imagine. Wow.
And I have to honestly say I was disheartened that he didn't show up. I mean, I'm a trial lawyer, but I think I'm a reasonable guy. I'm not, you know what I mean? I don't take cheap shots at folks. I'm not going to get down in the mud. I am going to get down in the facts. And if the facts create a problem for you, well, the facts are. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but no one is entitled to their own set of facts. And I think we have a set of facts here that we need to address in front of the people. And for whatever reason, him and his campaign didn't show up. He had some guy, whoever he contracts with, make some response that had zero substance and virtually bloviating. And I would even go as far as to say just bragging, you know what I mean, about, oh, well, don't worry about it, we're not worried about. And him not showing up, being MIA, that's what it's been the last 14 years, in my opinion. He's been missing in action, besides showing up to events with folks that, espouse some of these things that normal citizens in our district doesn't espouse to. But it's really taking the voter for granted. It's authority without accountability. What do you do when you never have to come forward and face the voters? I told some Republican voters the other day, all of which said, we're supporting your candidacy, because they even see the need for change. And I told them, you can have my cell phone number, and I want you to hold me accountable. I don't want to win this seat and leave the 40% of the district that's Republican behind. No, you have to become what the people need you to become. You don't have to abandon your principles but you do have to lead everybody. And I have voters in this district that have said to me on the campaign trail, veterans, that they asked for things to be done, for his office to do things. They didn't get responses. And when they finally did get a hold of him, months and months and months later, they were literally blasted out, nothing done for them, virtually hung up in their face because they were Democrats.
Wow.
Yeah.
These
That's
are
cold.
These are very cold, and I've had people with tears running down when there are real issues. There are people that live in Mojave County and Kingman and other areas that have to drive 2-3 hours, veterans, for a medical appointment, and you waste time trying to get a bill about a chimney in the desert to do, or a $500 bill. Or talking with Debbie Lesko about saving a gas stove, which I'm a gas stove guy. I got a gas stove in my house too. But I mean, what brings this really to the forefront? And then when you all spoke out in 2018, and then I saw what happened January the 6th when Paul stood up on the floor and said, "Don't count 3.5 million Arizonans vote. This is not a partisan issue. Independents, Dems, Republicans, don't count any of their votes." I said to myself, these are the first words that came to my mind. How dare you? Again, talk about Jim, that's the day my grits were overcooked. Yeah. That was it. Those boogers were burnt by that day. And I was done after that. And the next thing that came to my mind is they told us.
Yes.
Yeah.
They told us 3 years ago that this is what we were getting into. They warned us. They said back, and it didn't get better. It didn't even remain, but it got worse. Mm-hmm. And
if he was for the people, why didn't he just stay home and run out of his own district and represent the people where he lives? No, see, the fact that he hops around the state, now this is the 3rd district he's been a part of, tells you it's not about the people, it's about Paul, and he can tell people that Social Security and the border are connected, and he knows darn right well that's a lie, is because Paul has no respect for the voter. He just says, I'll just, whatever, I can tell and get by with you here. Maybe you won't check on me, then I'll tell you that. And Paul's got an abysmal record on even Social Security. I mean, he's tried to cut that program over the years. And
he won't tell the voters that when he's having these little round tables. He won't tell them, I tried to cut it more than once.
And the solution to the problem is dead simple. Yeah. All you do is you take where the cap is now at 140,000. We don't pay Social Security above that. And you put a little window in there so we don't really tax people that may be middle class, and then above that tax for Social Security, and if you were to do like 400,000 up to or whatever the income might be, if you did that, it'd be secure for the rest of this century. You know, it's not raising the retirement age to 70. I mean, that's just insane. You know, why even pay into the system if you have to wait till 70?
Or baiting and switching with folks that we made a promise to. We made a promise to these folks, and now they're in their mid, and you want to bait and switch on these folks?
Or how about the younger generation that needs that work, need those career opportunities? You keep holding in the older labor force, and you're not cultivating the next generation.
Absolutely. And there's so many things, like I said, that could be changed. And I appreciate you all so much for having this time. And I want to be clear with you, and thank you, for your support. Thank you for having a conversation. You're voicing out, saying that I'm a better choice, and I believe it. If I didn't think I was a better choice for this election, I wouldn't be. I'd say no. She's the better choice for Kathleen. You know what I mean? Or somebody. If there was somebody else, I'll even go as far as to say this: if Paul, it didn't matter to me that he's a Republican. If Paul was in there and doing a good job, I wouldn't be running against him. It doesn't matter to me that you're a Republican. Do the work of the people. But this has been so horrendous and inexcusable. January 6th being at the top of the list, and your hands are in it. Your hands are dirty. You know what I mean? You got blood on your hands. And he does. And so glad for that judge out there in Mesa County in Colorado, that whoever, I forget the lady's name, but she
Tina Peters.
Tina Peters.
Yeah, that's the one that got sentenced to jail.
If what that record shows and what was proven in that trial, she deserves every day of those 9 years, period. I've seen people go to jail for longer than that for DUIs, and this woman upsets the whole democracy and all of that. No, there's some things where, and so I kudos to that judge, and that's not a partisan issue. That is an American issue that we must defend the democracy. But if Paul was in doing a good job, I wouldn't even be running against it.
Well, his own fellow congressman, and their staffers talk trash about him all the time. Yeah. I mean, there's this used to be in the Tea Party in Denver, Riggleman, and he wrote a book too, a bestseller a few years ago. And in there he says that he's got him and Louis Gohmert, who's no longer in Congress, I guess, had serious cognitive issues, and that Paul was a blatant white supremacist. I mean, he said that in his book. This is a fellow conservative member of Congress who said that. It all through, the staffs will tell you this all about him. The Republicans would dearly wish to get rid of Paul, if the truth be known.
Yeah. I've had Republicans say that, and I think that's what one of the things about my candidacy, and I'm a moderate Democrat. I had and in the middle of the road, and that's who I am. That's who raised in the small town. You know what I mean? So I get the small town. We were talking about that earlier about Blythe, the difference between Blythe and where you all were raised. I get it. I'm a small town kid. I don't have to be reinvented. You know what I mean? I like the smell of wet alfalfa in the morning. You know what I mean? I know that's weird. I live in the big city now, but in my heart, I'm a country kid. You know what I mean? And I get both sides. I've been on welfare and food stamps. I went from welfare to faring well. I've been on all of it. I've been called racial expletives. I've arrested people and rolled around in the mud with parolees and taken them to jail. I've had to defend them in court. You know what I mean? So, I have a balance that I can bring, and I think Granny said it's a poor dog will wag his own tail. For this election, I'm a bridge back for Republicans and for conservatives. I'm a bridge back to saying you don't have to stay out there and for 2 years. That's it. You got to run again. As soon as the election's over November the 6th, we got to start running again November the 10th. You know what I mean? It's that fast of a turn. But for those folks that know we have to move ourselves away from that, it's their opportunity to say, thank you, Mr. Gosar, for your service. Go get healthy, because go get healthy, because there are clearly some medical issues there. Go be reconciled to your family. You've been in Congress long enough. You're going to get to retirement and all that other stuff, and go sell into the sunset. But let the country go forward. And I agree the border needs to be secure, but I do agree we can do it humanely. I think we can give consideration to these families. I don't think we have to ravage families. You know what I mean? There are things that we can do. I do agree that we can save Social Security. We must save Social Security. We got to keep our commitment to people. We don't have to raise the age. We can do some of the things exactly like you said. Let's make sure folks at the top start putting their money where it needs to be. We can fix all of these issues. The economy, can it be improved? Yes, I think we're seeing evidence that it's improved now. It takes time for economic policies to come to fruition. Some of what good folks experienced under President Trump's administration was windfall back in from when Obama was president, and it'll be going. Whoever the next president is, whether it's Trump or Vice President Harris, they're going to get some of the good that President Biden has done in his term of office. That's just the way the country works, but. The failure is not always at the presidency. It's Congress, a Congress that has failed to act, and unfortunately, Congressman Gosar has been just right in the thick of that stuff.
And to join you in that, it's not, if he was, as a Republican, sincerely and genuinely doing the work of the district that he lives in, no problem. We can disagree. Sure. And we've never been about party. We have never spoken about party because we don't care. Yeah. We have to meet the first threshold, which is human decency. Yeah. And Paul does not meet that. Yeah. Again, like I mentioned before, rather than seek to understand, to use information for his and everyone else's benefit, he seeks to judge. And he does not want information because that furthers, right? That look at me, I'm the most hateful. I'm the person that's the angriest about, outraged about what?
Just mirror what he thinks people want him to be so that he can get elected. I mean, that's what you want. I mean, 89, is that what you want? Just some guy who is telling you one thing, he does whatever else he wants, and he's just counting on you not to look at his record. He's counting on you to just go, wow, Paul said some really good buzzwords I like. And that's all I need. That's all I need. I don't care if he's actually out there trying to take away my health care, or he's not trying to solve the border, or he's, secretly trying to destroy Social Security, or, not supporting our vets. I don't care. Just because Paul comes home and he says whatever buzzwords I want to hear, and that's all I need. Come on.
Yeah, or women, women shouldn't be trusted to choose about their own health care. Yeah. No. Right. How dare they? In fact, Cecilia Richards, how dare you sit in front of me, ma'am?
We haven't even gotten around to the issue of reproductive rights in this election and the importance in particular in Arizona. But I will say that when we go around the district, the number one issue that we hear about is access to health care. Because when you're talking about people in rural areas, they have to travel for hours, often to Phoenix or to places outside of our state to get adequate health care. And certainly for veterans, that should not be the case.
Richest country in the world.
Yeah, this is not being adequately addressed. And we have heard reports of folks reaching out to your brother's office and not getting any response whatsoever, and even going so far as traveling to Washington, D.C. and showing up at the office.
Yeah. He's got no solutions.
So,
He's got no solutions. He just, wants to say things and then just go on his merry way and do stupid bills to get a $500 bill, or, have some solar chimney outside in the desert that's taller than any building in the United States. It's laughable. I mean, your voters got to look that one up. They're going to get a chuckle out of that.
And it's heartless.
Yeah.
Because any one of us could be that person that really needs the agency of that office for the help.
There was somebody told us out in the district that there was a young girl, a teenage high school girl, that went to the district or to the office in D.C. to raise concerns, about something, and she was literally fussed at and put out the office, literally. But hold on. Even if you don't agree, first of all, this is a kid. You know what I mean? You sit down and you introduce them to the government. You explain to them why the differences in position. You certainly don't fuss at and yell at and kick somebody out. You know what I mean? This is what we were told. And you know what I mean? It's like, well, geez Louise, we can do better. Again, that's why they said, well, everybody has their campaign slogans, whatnot. Mine was clear from the beginning. It's some of the conversations we have to have are complicated, and some of the things we have to find agreement on are a little complicated. But the choice couldn't be clear. It's as simple as A, B, C, a better choice. That's it. But we have a better choice, and I think the voters have an opportunity to make that choice this election. I'm about, and again, I get it. I may even be a one-term congressman, because if the Republican Party is smarter, I win the seat. Go find a reasonable, sensible, responsible Republican that got good sense, John McCain-ish, and bring them in there and run. And the chances of them unseating me, pretty high. You know what I mean? You ain't gonna make that many inroads in 2 years. You know what I mean? Pretty high that the but you as a party, the Republican Party needs a chance to heal and mend its wounds from this chaos that has been going on since 2016. You know, heal and bring your guy in here, and maybe we can get some sensible legislators, some folks at the table, you know, that'll do the job. Yeah. So thank you all for being here today. And I'll say this to you all. I appreciate you being here. I of course, certainly want to stay connected. And if and when I'm elected to Congress, I promise I will represent, I know you don't live into this, but represent you well, or represent this endorsement well. You're not going to have to chase me down because I ran far left or ran far right. You don't have to get picked up the phone and call me, Dave. Now, Quacy, you said, I'm not going to introduce any bills to make any $500 bills that put, you know what I mean? Just to be, and I promise the voters, I'll be a good representative for the 2-year opportunity. And come in 2 years, come check my record. And if my record doesn't add up, send me home. You know, and this is why you elect congressmen every 2 years. And so I appreciate you all for being here today. It means the world to me. When I say I've enjoyed every second of this, I mean it. I pray for your brother every day. I'm going to keep doing that. I'm a man of faith. I am. I want him healed, whole, healthy. I don't want him in office. I want to be clear about that. I don't think he needs to be there. I think he needs to go home and heal and be reconciled. And him and his wife, and you know, go sail into the sunset. You know, we're going to take care of that, you know, but I pray for your family. I want you all to hear. Pray for your mother and you know, the whole that dynamic. I want you well, but I want our district to move along. Yeah. I want the state to move along and the country to move along. And so
people in your district's lives are no less important than ours, yours, or anyone else's. They have, it is only fair that they be able to live and make real decisions that are based on information, based on facts, on someone that's willing to be honest with them.
And that's what I want to do. Just always be honest and fair and reasonable and represent everybody. And so thank you. I appreciate it. Tim, thank you. I know, you know, some of the impairments with that, but your presence here is.
It's great being here.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, speaks volumes. And this means the world to me. You know, folks have come along in different agencies and all the stuff, an endorsement for this. And to be honest, and we've, you know, interchanged with them, and we haven't publicly put out any, you know, endorsement, but this one matters. This one matters, and again, it took me a minute to get here. You know what I mean? Because I just don't, you know, I'm trying to be a person of principle, but I think you all were fair in your, you know, this is just truth. It's just the facts. This is what's happened. You know what I mean? And again, I hate to say it. I know you said it's not the "I told you so" campaign. Yeah. I'll say it because you did, and I live in the district, and the district didn't listen. You know what I mean? Yeah. And here we are again, but. Last time we ran unopposed. We got a real shot this time.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. And you know, and are you doing your family member any favors by letting them go off the rails in public and not trying to rein them in, by not trying to say no? I mean, I think, to be honest with you, the people that have been silent in this whole affair have done him a grave disservice. I mean, if the other people in our family who think like we do had spoken out, and I mean, even members of his own immediate family, they could have put maybe a stop to this, or at least the most bizarre things. But he just, you know, he's brushed aside our, appeals to him to try to, temper down the extremism, and he just goes on and on and on, and there's just no repercussions. There needs to be repercussions. The voters need to say, you know what, Paul, come on, you work for us. We don't work for you. You work for us. You're our employee. okay? It's time you started acting like that and do things for us. That's what you're here for, you know?
Awesome. Excellently put.
Well, thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. We can't express enough how much it means to us that you would express yourselves publicly in this regard and provide Quacy with your support and your endorsement. And so this is it for Quacy Smith and the challenge that we face, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much.